The next section is about local authentication methods. What we have by default is, as it says in the first, password-only lock-in method. Text passwords. Everybody uses password to get onto the system or to manage the system or whatever we're doing with the system. I think what I want to try to do here is to demonstrate most of what this next slide set is about and then go through the slides. So what we have, and I want to go through a couple of things here. If I do the show run, then we'll leave that there. Show run access class. We have a login here. And what I've done with this and access control list, and later on we're going to talk about restricting access via telnet or SSH. So what I created was an access list. Maybe it do it, so we'll do that. And access class is the way that we apply. We had access group for the interfaces. Yeah, interface, well, we'll make the one. Access class applies this thing, but there's no access list, so it's not going to do anything for me. What we have here for telnet, line VTY04 and line VTY515 are the telnet lines. Line con0 is the console line. We can configure these for passwords if we want. Right now this says login, and if I try to telnet to it, it's going to hopefully tell me that I don't have the ability to do it. So telnet to 192.168.1.1 closed by foreign host, because it says telnet but there's no password set on it. Login says we can log in. If we wanted to do it without a password, we would say no login. What this says is you got to log in. So the default method, and we'll just do the VTY04, line VTY04, 04, and we can do password. And now, with any luck, it should tell me that I can password. And if I try to enable, it says no password set. So to get into privilege exec mode, I have to set and enable password. I'm in business here, but we're still in the single password sort of arrangement. Let's just do a Control A, takes me to the front of this, and let's say no password, just to get out of this thing. What we want to be able to do is to use a local database of usernames and passwords. So username, and then the name, and we'll do me, and then the password. I can set password to specify the password for the user. This is going to be unencrypted. Privilege level is the privilege level it sets. I'm going to do privilege level 15, which is administrative root authority on this thing. The privilege levels can be used to later on, beyond the scope of CCNA, actually in CCNP, you can use this, specify that only two of them are specified. Privilege level 1, which is user exec, privilege level 15, which is privilege exec. We can use the betweens in order to specify which commands can be run at those privilege levels, and then for the users that we create, we can give them access to specific things. So do show, remember the do, show run, username, and you notice this 5 here is MD5. We have the hashed password. I'm going to go in, and since we can do that, and then we need to enable secret to get to the enable mode, because we couldn't do that before. Now then, I can go to line VTY04 and do login local, and I should now be asked for a username and password when I log into this thing, when I try to do this. So let's log out here, and let's try to log in again. And username, the password was what? Secret. And you notice it put me directly into privilege exec mode because of the privilege level that I can also go into the line VTY04 and use access control list. And you have to use the same process, but instead of using access group, we use access class. This one supports login authentication using usernames and passwords. You need to apply some minor configuration changes, which we saw. The username we created, password will create the level 7. We've already done the service password encryption and a no service password encryption for the unencrypted passwords, the plain text ones, then become type 7 encryption, which isn't really very strong. Login local subcommand on the VTY console, we did that. We logged in with the username and password. The enable password is not encrypted because of the no service password encryption in the configuration file, the default configuration file. The enable password unencrypted, if we have the enable password and the enable secret, only the enable secret is going to work for those things. The enable password stores it in clear text because of the no service password encryption. Service password encryption will encrypt it, not very securely, but will encrypt it. So we can go back to exit here and do service password encryption and do show run. We probably don't have any of those, do we? Now we can do enable password. But if you try to get into enable mode with this one, it won't work. The type 7 password, this is what password is, and you can, again, there are places on the internet to crack Cisco passwords. You can copy this and paste it. It should get there pretty quickly. It's not a very secure method. The new device is actually going into SHA-256 to do those things. So we've done that. We've looked at the enable secret. Encodes it with an MD5 hash. That's what the 5 stands for, is the MD, Message Digest 5, the hash, the MD5 hash. Access to the device, the source address, we got that. It's where it came from. Can restrict access by 2 methods. The source address refers to the address from which the packet originates. Telnet, using the following access to remote access Telnet or SSH, we can use access control list on the virtual terminal, the VTY lines. So use the following access to remote users to the switch or router. Authenticates the user to them. We can use the username and password to restrict access, or we can use the source address using an access control list, a standard access control list for the source address. Source address, where the packet comes from. Switch and router check the source address with a list of permitted packets, the access control list. If it's found in the list, it's going to be accepted. If the source address is not found in the list, it's going to be discarded. When we do those things. Actually, let's look at, I've got it already applied that you saw, but I don't have an access control list. What is kind of neat or unneat, I guess, at the same time is if we do this, access list 1, because we've already applied it with the access class there, permit 192.168.2, and let's go back here and do host since I don't want to write the wildcard mask. So it's now applied. This is 192.168.1.2. So let's what we'll disable and then telnet to it, username and password. You can see that we get there. We don't have to go through that same process again. This is not 1.2. So let's try to telnet to 192.168.1.1, and it's trying. It's not going to get there because it's not on the list. Connection timed out, remote host not responding because it wasn't one of the permitted addresses that would be available. If it's not found, it just doesn't let us get logged in. Filter criteria that will ensure unnecessary data does not flow onto the network. We still have to do the in and the out when we apply the access control list. Telnet protocol enables TCP/IP connections, port 23, not a secure protocol. If you can get it in a Wireshark, you can read everything that's on it. But we can, Telnet at the command line. Telnet is a capability of Windows, but it's turned off. If you configure it, you can Telnet, you'll get to a command prompt. Except the IP address or the domain name, as long as the domain name FQDN can be resolved either in a host file or in a DNS server. Invokes the terminal emulator or the Telnet client, and the Telnet server is the device that listens for the commands. Two different parts, the client and the server, and I said it's off in Windows. The Telnet server is off in Windows, the thing that accepts Telnet connections. The Telnet client is on, the one that attempts to connect to the server, obviously. The Telnet server runs on the Cisco devices. SSH is a secure method, secure shell to connect to these things. I think you got a lab to do that. You do have to configure the host name, the DNS domain, define a domain, it doesn't matter what it is, and then generate the key. The reason you have to use the host name and the domain is it uses those in the key generation. So they do have to be configured. You have to have the device named, and you have to have a domain specified so it can generate the SSH key. And the and change the transport protocol to SSH instead of Telnet. Once that happens, you can now do a secure connection to the remote access. Couple of things here. The typical VTY level settings, a timeout value. We can set that with the exec. That's how long the Telnet session is going to be active if we get up and walk away from it. Why is that important? You get up and walk away from it, and somebody that's not authorized to use it sits down and uses that particular connection. We don't really want those kinds of things to happen, so it'll automatically time out. It's set in minutes and seconds. The reason, and what I want to say here, is use the help screen for the times. The Cisco times are not consistent. Sometimes they're minutes and seconds, sometimes they're minutes, sometimes they're seconds, sometimes they're hours, minutes, and seconds, sometimes they're milliseconds. So you need to know what the units are before you actually configure it. Password, the combination of the password and the login commands generates a generic user initiating the Telnet session. We looked at that with just the password level. What we can also set it to use the login local. Switch must be configured with an IP address, subnet mask. I had that. The interface VLAN 1, the management interface, that's already configured on the switch. We put an IP address on it and a subnet mask. It's on that network. If we're going to manage it from outside of that network, we have to also use the IP default gateway command in order to give it a default gateway so it knows where the default router is. Has nothing to do with how the switch forwards Ethernet frames. The only reason a switch needs an IP address is to be able to be managed remotely, to Telnet or SSH to it. If we're just going to use console ports for everything, you don't really need an IP address on it. The switch must have a default gateway if it goes outside of the network. I mean, it's just like an IP address for anything else. The banner message, and there are 3 of them here. We talk about the message of the day, the login, and the exec. The only thing that Packet Tracer allows me to do is the message of the day, but it's going to be the same process. Banner, MOTD, and the next thing that we need here says the banner C, where it's a delimiting character. The delimiting character says, hey, I'm going to start my banner. Special characters are usually better for this, because if I use C here, it would start the delimiting. The next time I use it, say, okay, you're done. You're done with this. If I want to say, this is my banner, and if I banner, B-A-N-N-E-R, and if I want to do 2 lines, my second line, and then if I want to kind of put it in the middle of things, I should be able to do something like this and do offset. Things that you can do, just different things that you can do with this thing. When I get done with all of this, then I do my delimiting character again, which I use the pound sign for. So now then, and let's disable and log out. This is one that should start before anything happens. This is my banner in my second line, and then the offset if you want to put things around it. The login should be one, and I think the one Mike had yesterday said this is a secure system. Put something there that is legally enforceable. The reason I say that, many years ago now, somebody got onto a network, hacked the network, did a lot of damage, took him to court, and the hacker won because the login message said, "Welcome to our network." Didn't say, "Don't hack our network." We will prosecute you. Those types of things. So, be sure that you use something that is legally enforceable. And we have the message of the day that shows up as you see before login. The login is the one that unauthorized access strictly prohibited. Yeah, that's something there. I think it's the CIA website and the security websites, the government ones, give you some that are pretty good. I think we got ours from the CIA website actually, and it was a very long one that nobody actually would read, I'm sure, but it gave us enforcement authority. Exec. This is after it's been logged on. After you log in, this would be authorized users that you want to send them messages when you do those things. And there, the message of the day: router I will be down for maintenance at midnight, whatever, and party on the 3rd floor, whatever the message of the day may be for these things. Log in. Yes, if you log in, we're going to prosecute you if you do an illegal. So the banner command, banner whatever we'll be using, banner login, banner message of the day, banner exec. The key here is the delimiter. And the delimiter starts it, the delimiter ends it. The first, and it says for all 3 banners, the banner type will be the first parameter with MOTD being the default type. The first non-blank character specified after the banner type is considered as the beginning delimiter character. Type the text, and you saw you can do multiple lines. You can use the stars to put things in the middle. You can format them for yourself if you want to do that. And then the delimiting character at the end says, "This is it." So it's kind of like putting a quote in quotation marks. But we call it a delimiter character in order to do these things. The banner can span several lines. We saw that, did that with the enter key. Just keep going, enter key, and you can do the offsets however you want to do it. Use the beginning delimiter character. The CLI will treat the banner as being configured with a text between the two delimiter characters as the banner text. Yeah, that's the ones that we saw. We have, and this we'll go through. This is an hour's worth of labs. I want to do the summary slide, and then we'll do a lab for a little while, and then get started on the next one. Port security we looked at earlier allows us to restrict the number of devices, the MAC addresses. We can also configure how many MAC addresses, what are the MAC addresses, and what happens if there is a violation. So all of those things can happen. The default, the number is 1. The default type is dynamic secure. The default violation is shutdown, which is actually error disabled. The static, we can manually configure and remove them. Sticky allowed us to put them into the configuration file, and if we saved it to the startup config file, it will survive a reload. Enable port security. By default, the dynamic secure MAC address is used in the learning method by the Cisco. Sticky puts it into the configuration, the violation modes, and 2 commands for setting a secure password on your switch and router: the enable password command and then the enable secret. Again, and the enable password is by default not encrypted. We can turn encryption on, the type 7 encryption with the service password encryption. The enable secret, MD5 hash. We can create usernames and give them passwords, as well as levels of access as privilege levels when we do that. And again, if you give somebody privilege level 15, they automatically go into the enable mode. Uses the VTY lines for connections, the virtual terminals for Telnet, and SSH.